Resuming debate, the honourable member for Surrey North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As always, it's an honour to speak in this House on behalf of my constituents from Surrey North. And today we're talking about pay-to-pay. Basically, the motion's asking for the government to should ban all pay-to-pay practices by banks operating in Canada through the enactment of a mandatory financial code of conduct to protect consumers, to protect Canadians. Mr. Speaker, pay-to-pay, to sort of explain it in simple terms, is basically the banks charging people to send their bills, and not only that, the bank's charging people to pay their additional bills. So it's pay on top of pay. It sounds ridiculous. We shouldn't be discussing this in this House. That this practice should have been banned long time ago by the Conservatives. They have been in government 9 years, and before that we had the guys in the corner there, and none of them chose to address this issue over the years. And whereas the banks have been gouging Canadians, trying to take their hard-earned money just to receive a bank statement, Mr. Speaker. But under the Conservatives and basically this government, Canadians are paying millions of dollars to their friends, which are the big banks, Mr. Speaker. And that's you know, there's been estimates done by research as to how much of a problem it is, how big of an issue this is. This is $180 million of taxpayers' money, Canadians' money, hard-earned money, that the Conservatives have been helping their friends in the big banks to pick pockets of the very people that actually need the money to make ends meet, Mr. Speaker. Conservatives have been helping their friends in the banking system to gouge Canadians for $180 million. So instead of cracking down on these excessive fees, the Conservatives have refused to basically take action over the last 9 years, siding with their friends again, the big banks, Mr. Speaker. And it's the New Democrats who are standing up for Canadians, who are fighting on behalf of Canadians to ensure that they are not being gouged, their pockets are not being picked with the help of the Conservatives, Mr. Speaker. Like I said, Mr. Speaker, it was in the 2011 when basically the Canadians started noticing these extra billing, if you want to call that. Basically, they were starting to charge Canadians for getting their bills through the mail. Not only the banks were doing it, we had the utility companies doing it, telephone companies doing it, we had internet, cable. All of these companies started to sort of jump on the bandwagon and say, hey, here's another way to you know, gouge the Canadians, and let's see if somebody notices that. And you know, the Conservatives, they did not notice that at all. They were in fact helping the very big companies that were gouging Canadians, and it was the NDP that raised this issue first back in 2012, and we've been trying to get the Conservatives to come on board, and not only come on board, but help protect the Canadians, Mr. Speaker, and they haven't been paying attention to any of that. So it's good to see them actually supporting this motion. But you know, my question to them is, are they going to have this in this amendment in the budget implementation bill, or do they want a unanimous motion in the House so we can get this done before the House rises for the summer, Mr. Speaker? And we're willing to work with the Conservatives and the third party to ensure that Canadians are you know, let's put a stop to this gouging that's going on, or picking at pockets of Canadians, and we can do this right now. We can do it right now. We can do it today. However, I doubt the sincerity of the pledge of the Conservatives, because they haven't done it for the last 9.5, 10 years. Why? Is this maybe another gimmick before the election, Mr. Speaker? I hope not. I hope they are sincere and they will get it done before we break for the summer. So, Mr. Speaker, you know, they did one of the things they did do in the Budget Implementation Act and the throne speech they had. They brought in with much pressure from the NDP. We apply a lot of pressure over the last 3 years, you know, talking to the consumers, talking to Canadians, families, talking about this very fees that were being basically extracted from them, from the Canadians. And the Conservatives, from pressure from the NDP, they actually backed off and eliminated pay-to-pay fees for the telephone company, cable companies, gas companies, utility companies. So why not the banks, Mr. Speaker? Is this because the banks have a very special relationship with the Conservatives? In fact, Mr. Speaker, banks made $16 billion. The 5 big banks made $16 billion in the last 2 fiscal quarters. And, you know, these fees they're charging. You know, Conservatives often talk about that we're going to put, you know, money back into the pockets of Canadians. Here they're helping steal money from pockets of Canadians and giving it to their friends. This is their record, Mr. Speaker, and this is their record. And if they're really interested in being on sides of the families, as I know my colleagues in the New Democratic Party are, we are on the side of Canadian families. We are on the side of seniors. We're on the side of people that are making ends meet. Yet this government, Conservatives, are not on the side of the average families. They're not on the side of the middle-class families. In fact, they're helping to pick pockets of those very families that they pretend on helping out. Mr. Speaker, I've often talked about this. I owned a small business myself, and I know how small businesses are economic engines of this country, and the small businesses generate majority of the jobs that are being generated in the Canadian economy. And when it comes to protecting small businesses, when it comes to help them foster, when it comes to help them create new jobs, the Conservatives, you know, they just lack any sort of motivation to help the very people that are creating these jobs. They borrowed one of our ideas. You know, NDP said we will cut the small business tax by 2 percentage points, and we would do it sooner. But the Conservatives borrowed that idea, and which is fine. But still, they're going to back end it. So it'll start a few years later than what we had proposed for. And this is again our idea to ensure that consumers are protected. And now they're getting on board, but I'm not really, you know, I feel uncomfortable as to how sincere they are in bringing about this change, Mr. Speaker. Again, small businesses are economic engines of this country. Not only that, Mr. Speaker, being a business owner, I know firsthand the very merchant fees that are being charged, or the small businesses are being gouged by the credit card companies, by the big banks, Mr. Speaker. And I'm not talking about small change here. I'm talking about 3 or 4% to 6%. And that's a lot of money. That sometimes is a difference between making a profit or going in or not making a profit. And I know that, Mr. Speaker, because firsthand I experienced it, watched those thousands of dollars being raked up by the credit card companies in guise of merchant fees and this fee, that fee. And that sometimes was a difference between whether we made money in 1 month or the next month. You look at other fees the banks are charging, you know, anywhere from you know, a couple of dollars to $3, $4 when we try to withdraw our own money. This is not somebody else's money. You know, withdraw our own money from the bank and use it for everyday purchases and stuff. And we have been asking this government, we have been pressuring this government to ensure that Canadians are able to get a service that is, you know, reasonable. You know, banks have to make profits. They have to deliver. But, Mr. Speaker, gouging is something that this side of the House will not tolerate. And I can assure you, come 2015, October 2015, Canadians are going to be looking for a leadership that protects their interests. And I can assure you they're looking at the NDP. And these guys are not going to be here come October because they have failed to protect Canadians. They have failed to protect the pockets, the very pockets of families that Conservatives are helping to pick out of there and give it to their friends, Mr. Speaker. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I know my time is up, and I'll be ready for any questions from the Conservative side.